25th meeting of the Lisbon School Committee. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Everybody's here.
Wait.
Nope. No need to thank Pete. And no adjustments to the agenda.
There are none.
So tonight, our workshop is on the MEAs. And I guess that's in the hands of people out there. So go to it, please. For the benefit of everybody here, would you introduce yourselves?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm Heather Wilmot, literacy specialist at Sugg Middle School. I brought with me the rest of our literacy specialist team and coaches. So I have Carrie Bailey from the high school, and then Audrey Corcoran from the elementary school.
Oh, I remember Audrey. No, that was good.
So for tonight, we have some goals established for the information we're going to present. We're going to be looking at some of our state, regional, and national assessments. Give you a little bit of an overview of the purpose of the tests that we give in the Lisbon School Department. Share with you some testing data. Yes, like you had said, that we will be looking at MEA data. In addition to that, we'll be looking at NWEA data and also be looking at some SAT information.
Did you get that, Sean?
We're going to look at the shift in state testing, which is the changes from MEA to NECAP. We'll do a brief overview for you, and then we'll talk a little bit about our roles as literacy specialists as a team for the district and also our roles at individual schools.
Do you need lights or anything, Mr. No. Any help?
I'm good, I'm good.
To give you an idea of the assessments we're covering tonight, on the left we'll begin with the NWEA. We'll work our way to the MEA, work our way to a brief overview of NECAP assessment, and then to be addressing the PSAT and the SAT data. We wanted to give you an idea of where these tests were administered and what grade levels they were administered to and when. You're going to notice the NWEA is given at all 3 schools from grades 2 to 10. The only thing that you're going to notice that's a little bit different is given in the fall and spring for all schools, and LCS is the only school that does an additional testing in the winter. The MEA is given for LCS and PWS. We're looking at there something that's a little bit different. Only grades 5 and 8 will take the science portion of that assessment. The NECAP assessment, which is the transition we're going to be talking about, our students just took that recently in October. That is the new state standardized assessment. It's a regionalized test where it's grades 3 through 8 take the assessment, where it is assessing the previous grade level, and I'll go into that in detail. That's administered in the fall. And then looking at the PSATs and the SATs at the high school. The first assessment we're going to talk about is the NWEA. We've been providing this assessment for our students since the year 2006 in grades 3 through 10 and currently including grade 2. The benefit of using the NWEA with our students, it's a computerized adaptive assessment where it measures the growth and progress of a student over time. And as we monitor that growth and progress, we can also use the data to help us improve our teaching and to improve achievement in our students. One of the great benefits is when the students are taking the test, it is computerized and it is completely individualized. It will adjust to the students' needs as they are taking the test. And what I mean by that is if they are successful on a question, the test will become a little bit more challenging. If the question is proven to be too hard for that student, the test will back down a little bit, and it will keep adjusting as the student progresses, depending on the number, depending on the subject, the number of questions that they have. So it will adapt to their needs. A couple of pieces of language that I'll be using when we talk about the NWEA. You may hear me use the acronym ARIT or a RIT score. And I will be talking about growth. So I'll explain what those words mean as I use them. When we're talking about a RIT score, it's actually called a Rosh unit, which for you and for us as educators really doesn't mean much. I like to think about it as, and we tend to use with our students and staff, a RIT means when students, what are they ready for? The score that they receive on the assessment is called a RIT. When they take the assessment in the fall, they will receive a score for each of the subjects, and we call that their RIT score. It tells us what are they ready for. If you want to compare it to measuring a student's height over time, it gives us an opportunity to think about, okay, if they started in third grade with a certain score, how much does that score need to grow? To give you an idea of how the test is designed, and to give you an example of growth, if a student entered any grade level with a RIT score of 180, meaning they took the NWEA assessment in reading and they ended off with a score of a 180. We are looking for our students to grow, to move forward over that school year. And when I talk about growth, we're talking about from the beginning of the school year until the end of the school year. So we're talking about a fall to spring here. So they took the assessment in reading and they began with a score of a 180. What we would like for them to grow is 11 points. So when they take the assessment again in the spring, we need to see their score to show complete growth to end at a 191. So we're measuring, if you think about it, measuring their height every year. Are they moving forward? It's important for students to show growth because it sets targets for them. It gives them a goal to work toward. Something to keep in mind with this score, it doesn't matter the grade level that you're in with this score. If a student entered third grade with a score of a 180 or they entered sixth grade with a score of 180, it doesn't matter. Either grade level, they would still have to show the same amount of growth. If a student entered 8th grade with this score, they would have to grow 11 points. Okay, so it doesn't matter what grade they're in. It's all about the growth that they're making in 1 year, and we follow that growth over time. When we talk about growth in terms of individual classrooms, and when we talk about growth at grade levels, and we're talking about growth at building growth, we're looking for classrooms, grade levels, and for our buildings for 50% of our students to meet their growth target. And when I talk about their growth target, if the student took the test to go from a 180 to a 191, we want 50% of our students to meet the growth target. This 50% is based on NWEA data, meaning that based on their data, they feel that any classroom who uses this assessment should be able to come close to this target. 50% is an attainable goal. So this dotted line here, you're going to see on the next slides, we'll look at some data. It's going to represent the 50% mark. NWEA, we administer the reading, the math, the language, and 2 science assessments. Here we have data. We're measuring growth from fall 2007 to spring 2008, so this was 2 years ago. And then last year, fall 2008 to spring 2009. When you're looking at this slide, I want you to notice a couple of things. One, we're looking at a percentage. Our target is to have a performance of 50% of our students meeting or exceeding their growth target. And when I mean exceeding, they're going above and beyond. For example, that student who had a score of a 180 and we wanted him to score 191, if he scored a 192, he went beyond his growth target. So students who are showing above and beyond growth. When you look at this slide, you can look at it in a couple of different ways. You can either follow a particular grade level over time. So for example, third grade has 60% of their students meeting or exceeding their growth target at that grade level. The following year, that same grade level improved to 62%. So you can follow it from grade level to grade level. You can go across from second grade's performance 2 years ago, second grade's performance last year. You could go to third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade. And this provides us the data from second to eighth grade. You can also look at the performance and follow a group of students over time. So for example, if you wanted to follow this group of seventh graders, 2 years ago they're at 64%. Last year they moved on to eighth grade and they had increased and moved up to just a little bit over 73%. So that population of students, that cohort that you follow, has shown improvement. They were at above the average here at 64 and continue to grow as a class. Next year, we'll be able to continue to follow them again. It's our goal as a literacy team to take the data and then continue to track that for us. We okay?
Even though I don't like interrupting questions.
Yeah, I appreciate that with this up here.
Yeah. You talked about a cohort.
Yes.
In my experience, a cohort is the same group of kids all the time.
Yes.
So it is the same group of kids from sixth grade one year to seventh grade the next year.
Yes.
And then if some students come in who don't do as well, the grades don't go, scores don't go down because of their lower scores or lesser ability.
There could be an influence of students who are moving in and out. That, yes, could influence this data. If we had a,
It's not a real cohort.
no,
Okay.
yes.
Yes, no, it isn't.
Exactly.
No, it isn't.
Right.
No, it isn't. Yes.
Right. No, it isn't, because it's, yes, it would be a class, because it is influenced by students who move in and out. If we had a student who did move into the population and didn't take the assessment in the fall, so let's say a student moved into sixth grade, didn't take the assessment in the fall, but took it in the spring, his score wouldn't count even though he took it. So you're absolutely right with that, that would be an influence here.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, that's an influence on the data.
Does anybody else want to ask a question about that right now, even though?
The way I look at it, every class, if you look at it, every class in 2008 and 2009 improved over the year before. Your third grade, which is 63%, the year before was down under 50% because they were the second grade. And if you go right down the list, they all have climbed right up through and improved. Something's working.
This is
Yeah.
just an example, right? This is an
Those
actual.
are real.
This is real data. This is our data. Yep. This is our real data.
I have one question.
Absolutely.
If, as you're talking about students coming in and out, do we have the ability to ask the prior district if they do NWEA to get that data so that it's
We could.
actual?
We actually could do that. It would be a little bit more difficult in terms of the programming.
Okay.
It's not something available from NWEA. We couldn't go district to district. That would include some hand calculations
okay.
there. Right, and not every district has
Right.
NWEA.
Although it is becoming more popular
It
through the
definitely
districts.
is. It definitely is, I agree.
Okay.
But that's not offered from this
From,
computer-based system.
from that, okay.
Yeah, they run reports for us, and then, which is one of the beauties for us as specialists and as for teachers, the reports are very friendly, and they do that work for us, but that is one of the pitfalls for
Okay.
us. The next slides with the other subject areas look very much the same in terms of their construct. Looking at here having the 50%, you can follow the data in the same way.
George, you
I
have
have
a
a question.
question?
I'm just thinking, okay, this isn't set up as the same way as if it's on the state thing, but the concept's the same, I guess, but 50% that's a good line?
This assessment is not the state assessment, so it's a little
This
bit
is something
different
that
there.
we built in ourselves.
No, this is part of the program, and this is what they set as an average benchmark. that for us, that should be an attainable target for any classroom, any grade level. Classroom teachers, buildings.
We have like refresher classes before they take these tests? Do they, you know, or is it just a spur of the moment, we're taking a test today?
Well, the test, and when you speak of it that way, what the test offers us is it offers us information so that then the teacher can help adjust their instruction to help them move forward thereafter.
So it isn't, you know, you're not giving any refresher stuff beforehand?
No, we use it to inform instruction.
Okay.
No. Okay.
I think we're ready.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Language. Same design. Here we're seeing some exceptional growth from class to class and from grade level to grade level.
So overall, we're pleased,
Yes. Yes.
very pleased.
Science, when the students, and let me know if you needed me to go back to that prior slide, science test, when the students take it, actually it feels like to them they're taking one science test. But what happens is the science test is broken up into two separate spots. So they take the test, they'll go through about 30 questions, it will pause, and it will move on to a second test. So I'm going to show you two pieces of science data here. We administer the science assessment. We have the general assessment, grades 5 through 8, and we'll have the second one there. We don't do grades 2 through 4. But again, the same design here. One thing I want you to know about with the science, that assessment is newer for NWEA, and the data involved with that has evolved over time, really starting last year. That for teachers, the reports that became available really were at their height for last year. And then
Tracy has a question.
Yes.
Because we're taking science through an NWEA, does that match or come close to our main learning results? For information, I mean, is this some of this material new to the kids, or?
Some of it is going to be new. NWEA actually this year has worked to try to align their assessments to match not the MEA but the NECAP. So that's something that they are working on, and that's brand new for this year, I believe. I forget the month that they did that.
So the results in future years should be a little
Better
bit better
aligned.
because it's not information that hasn't been taught yet because of our main learning results.
Right.
Okay.
But the information that the students do come across, we got to keep in mind it will adapt to them. So if we have a third grader who's scoring extremely high, they've probably encountered information that may have not been on the learning results in their learning career. But they've done a much better job with working on alignment. And the concepts and processes. This is the second part of the test. So when they take the science assessment, they receive 2 scores. Seeing some exceptional growth as we move forward. Questions with these? Because we're going to transition to LHS information for NWEA, but I want to make sure I affirm your questions
Okay,
before
so
I
the
move forward.
sixth grade with 29 is now in the 7th grade this year? Is that what we're saying?
These 6th graders
Yeah.
are now the 7th graders here. Yes,
Okay, they've jumped
they
30
jumped.
points.
Yes. They jumped. They
Big
were,
improvement.
yeah, an amazing improvement here. And a lot of effort with the teachers to be working with the data and to become more informed about how do you use the data to improve your teaching and ultimately to improve learning.
More than 11 points.
Yeah, yeah, it's exceptional. Questions before I transition to Carrie?
Is it, because 6 has tended to be low, is that an indication of, I hate to say it, as an educator, problem?
I think that's a tough question for me to answer. You know, I think it give us information to look at data over time.
Okay.
With that.
Okay.
I might be able to answer or add to that. We identified last year, if you remember, there were a few classes, grade levels, where we saw some discrepancies in the testing, and so we have been evaluating our curriculum, teams, and et cetera, just to see if that would make a difference. So, not to avoid it, but we identified a few grade levels last year and have been working with them K through 12 just to make sure that everything is, find out if it was curriculum or what it might be.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Pete has a question.
Yeah.
I just want to say something. I think this is a program that was instituted when I was on the board before, came in new. And this is supposed to give the teachers practically instant information on how the students are doing. It looks to me, by what we're showing on the charts here, that when the sixth grade was down to 29.9%, the next year, seventh grade, it's up to 62, that the teachers are looking at what's going on and making the adjustments that they need to make to bring these students to learn what they're supposed to learn. And I think it's working. I really do. I never did, I got off the board before I ever found out whether it really was working or not. Now I'm getting a look at, kind of feeling back what it is, and I'm getting a look at what's going on, and I think it's working great.
Yeah, there's been a huge effort with the teachers to look at the data and to really look at individual students and then to look at an entire classroom to make decisions to improve learning. It's been a lot of important work for teachers and for staff.
One more thing.
Yeah.
The kids that don't, okay, so you get like 62% of passing in seventh grade. What about the other 40%? With those guys.
The other percentage there, what we're looking at, and this looks at growth. So they may or may, we're not going to, using the word whether they're passing or not, it's whether or not they're moving forward to meet their own goals, their own targets. We do have some students who fall in that population who have either moved forward but missed their target. We do have students who miss their target by 1 point, and they don't get a count into this. We do have students who completely miss their target by many points. So those students, that's again where we look at that student's data over time, relook at that, and adjust teaching and learning. And we'll talk a little bit more about that after, about how do we do that with staff. Yep.
Okay, it's great, 62%, but.
Yep, and we'll address that with our roles in our buildings. How do we support staff, and/or how do we support kids? What is our role there? So, thanks for that question. I'll provide you more details in a few more slides. Okay. Kara, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good evening. As Heather introduced us earlier, I'm actually at the high school, and both Audrey and I are learning this, so you can see why Heather's sort of taken the lead for us and talked about it. She's been a great mentor for all of us in terms of the NWEA data, and we're just trying to catch up and pick up speed with it. What we have here is an illustration of the class of 213, or the freshmen, and what is actually the only information that we have to give you about them is the median scores that they achieved. That's because the NWEA is not reporting from school to school, and we've had a conversation with them because we would like to be able to say what did they achieve in the 8th grade and how did that improve in the 9th grade. That data is not yet available to us. So what I did do is I put together what we could see this year, and we did make a request to ask them if we could figure out how to do that for the future, so that we could have a nice steady graph for you so that you could follow that throughout. So if you look at what we have here, the national median tells us sort of what the target is, and this is what the nation is doing, and that's their median score. And a median score means that's the middle score, and 50 students would be above it and 50 students would be below it, and that's what median actually means. So we've got 222 for national score, and we had 220. And in math we had 233 as the median national score, and we had 234. Now, we do have 2 years of data for grade 10, so you get a chance to see some of the growth that's occurred at the high school. In reading, the national median is 222. We had 222. And then the national median was 226, and we grew 2 points, but not to the extent of the national median, which was at 226. So we went from, in 1 year, from 222 to 224. And in math, we went from 231 to 237. One of the things that's really difficult and that you need to realize about the high school is that the same group of students is not necessarily being reported, as you were talking about before, Prudy, because some of the children, some of the students who do not pass English, for example, may still be regarded as freshmen, and so their scores would be considered as freshman scores rather than as sophomore scores. So conceivably, there may be some students who were 9th graders who again appeared in this 9th grade group a second year and didn't actually appear in this 10th grade reporting. So that's one of the difficulties that NWEA has, is when students leave 8th grade and they go into the high school, very often some of those students will be kept in a freshman and reported as freshmen when actually they are with that, you called it cohort, or that class, which actually moved ahead and they stayed behind. So sometimes that will change the scores slightly. And you just have to keep that in mind when you're looking at high school scores.
This offers us a transition to our MEA data that we have. We'll be looking at a couple of pieces. We'll be talking about the achievement level of our students. You may have heard students talk about, or teachers use the language, exceeds, meets, partially meets, and does not meet. That's the language that the MEA data uses. And also when we're talking about MEA, we're going to be looking at students' scores or a score range. And I'll show you what I mean by both of those. Over here we have the achievement levels for the MEAs, and this is assessing how the students are performing on our learning results, specifically our grade level expectations. This kind of blacked out here, but this is the exceeds the standard, meets the standard, partially meets the standard, or does not meet the standard. Going across the top, we have grades 3 through 8. The M states for the math, R for the reading. And then in grades 5 and 8, they also take the science portion of the assessment. So as you're looking at each grade level, I want you to look down under the letter. So these are the math scores. These are the reading scores. When you look at a score, to kind of figure out what that score means, if you'll notice, the first digit of the number represents the grade level, and that's consistent across the board. So if you're in the 5th grade, your final score begins with a 5. If you're in the 7th grade, your final score begins with a 7. If you're a 3rd grader, in order to exceed the standards, to go above and beyond the expectations, in math, you needed to score between a 361 to a 380. And if you want to think about it in this manner, this 61 would represent, they use a formula, but if you want to think about it as their overall score on the assessment. So you need to score between a 361 and a 380 for math, consistent for reading also. When you move to 4th grade, to exceed the standard, a 461, just that 4 changes. And if you go across the board, here you're going to notice it's pretty consistent, just the first digit changes. To meet the standard, we're looking for students to score between a 41 and a 60, or a 341, 360, 441, 460, consistently across the board. The MEA, with their achievement level scores, they start to change a little bit depending on the grade level when you're talking about scores that fall between a partially meets the standard and a does not meet the standard. So if I could draw your eyes to this dark line right here, if you could look at the numbers above the line going across and the numbers below the line going across. And that middle line there just separates elementary school and middle school. If you're a 3rd grade student, to partially meet the standard in math, you needed to score 331, or if you want to think about that, 31. But when you moved to 4th grade in math, you needed to score a 429 or 29. So that their scores, their levels are a little bit different and they vary a bit. So I just want to bring that to your attention. So as you look across, when you're in 6th grade for math, you need to score a 627. So that's a little bit different than the score that they would have received when they were in 5th grade, the expectations. And that's consistent also here with it does not meet the standard. You're going to see a little bit of variables in the number here, and that's based on the, what they had established for achievement levels by the state. What we're going to show for you tonight, we're going to look at the MEA scores. These MEA scores we're going to look at from 2 years ago and last year. We'll begin with the elementary school. We'll transition to the middle school, go back to the elementary school, and transition back to the middle school. What I want you to notice here and to think about here is that this bar represents a total population of students. These are 3rd grade students 2 years ago, in the year 2007, 2008. In this population, we had 8% of our students who did not meet the standard, and this is for reading. 32% of our students that match the color here partially met the standard. 58% of our students met the standard, and 2% of our students exceeded the standard or went above and beyond. The bar next to that follows this group of students when they went to 4th grade. So when they moved from 3rd grade into 4th grade and when they took the MEA, the population that did not meet the standard went from 8%, and we were able to shrink that by 1%, went down to 7%. Partially meeting the standard went down. We want to see those green bars and those red bars to decrease. With those, we want to see our smallest bars. We were able to move that from 32% to 28%. Our meets the standard bar here went from a 58% down to a 38%. But the beautiful thing that we do see here happening is that our exceeds the standard population jumped from a 2% to a 25%. So though we saw some shrinking in that yellow bar, we were able to pick up that in the exceeds the standard, which is a difficult thing to do, to have such a great population exceeding the standard there. Moving here is our 4th grade class for 2007, 2008, following them when they were 5th graders. And then 5th graders for 2007, 2008, then moving to 6th grade. So this is a middle school data, but we wanted you to be able to see that data over time.
So every time you take this test, it's always after the summer months?
This assessment actually was in March, middle of, I forget the exact dates, about middle of March.
The 4th grade with the exceeds standards in 0809 is not tested for the next year, and no, that'll be coming up.
That will be coming up, except for we won't have MEA data.
Right.
That won't exist. We'll be transitioning to the NECAP.
Okay, so you're not going to know if that exceeding carries through.
No, unfortunately, we're not.
Okay. We can live with that.
However, it should show up on NEWA results.
We should see great growth on the NWEA. We'll be looking for trends through all of the pieces of data.
Now, is these, every student in the grade takes it, even the,
Are there any exemptions?
yes.
Yes, there are. There are some students, I don't know all of the exceptions or the exemptions to really to be able to speak to that, but I do know that there are very, very few, very small population.
Okay,
Not more than a few.
Okay.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Karen?
Okay, you're saying all this in the percentages, that, how many actual students are we talking?
I don't know the total population of those students, but
So we're saying,
we could get that exact number for you.
so 7%
Yeah, around, give or take 100, depending on the grade level.
red line people that have been identified.
Not necessarily. Would you mean identified for,
Extra help?
some of them may be receiving services through special education, some of them may not, but they would be provided additional support.
This isn't something that you use to help identify the kids that need the help?
Yep, when we look at students who do need that extra support, we look at multiple pieces of data, and this would be one of the pieces of data we would look at.
Like 14% is a pretty good sized number to be in the red. In any class, I can imagine.
But if you look further to grade 5, it went down to 5%.
Down to 5%. Yeah. Yeah, as they moved to 5th grade, there was a great way for us to bring that down to a single-digit number. And again, here, from 12% down to 9%, that's decreasing over time. It would be nice if we could look at that for a 3rd year, but we won't have that.
They'll go back to get another one?
We didn't have access to that data. This gives you, the data is displayed in the same way, but it's the middle school reading achievement data. Looking across again, there was a decrease from the 13% to the 6%, a decrease in the partially meets, an increase in the meets, and then an increase then in the exceeds. Here we did see a decrease, a little bit of an increase, and then we had consistent pieces of data for exceeds the standard. Here we have 8th grade for 2007-2008. We don't have the next year of data for them. That's not something that we have available, but we wanted to give you that information also. Elementary school math for the MEA, displayed in the same manner. It's really exciting to see some of these blue bars, those exceeds, to go above and beyond, because it's very difficult to see having those increase or to even stay at that 13%. And then the middle school math. Again, from 6th to 7th grade, from 7th to 8th, and then the isolated 8th grade. Our middle school students have also their science achievement. This is for 2007-2008, a great increase from 12 to 18%. Our meets here from 63 to 42. 22 to 32, and 13 to 8 for 2008-2009 for science. Questions for the MEA data before we do have the next transition? Okay. We did want to offer you an opportunity to give you a little bit of information, because we will no longer be administering the MEA assessment. Our students at the beginning of the school year in the fall took the kneecap. We will no longer be participating in the MEA for reading and for math. We'll be transitioning to the kneecap. The other states that participate in that, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island, so we've joined that assessment. When we talk about the kneecap, we're still measuring grade level expectations. The kneecap data, when it does come in, it's due at the end of this week, tentatively. Their target date, I believe, was the 27th for that to be out. I don't know if they're still on target for that, but we should be getting that information very soon. When they talk about achievement, they'll no longer be using the exceeds the standard, meets the standard, partially meets the standard, or does not meet the standard. They're just using a different language, and we wanted to make sure that we shared that information. They'll be talking about proficient with distinction. That will be our old exceeds the standard. Bless you. And meets the standard will be considered proficient, or they'll refer to a level 3, partially proficient and below proficient. Level 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that will be something new for us when we receive the data. The MEA and the NECAP are more alike than not. Both assessments will still have in reading and in math the multiple choice constructed response and some short answer work for math. We are going to see a transition in writing. There will be a writing assessment. Our students in the past have taken the writing assessment on the MEA. They will be taking the writing assessment with NECAP. Not all grade levels will be doing that. But when they do take it, something new for us is that the students are going to be answering multiple choice questions that address editing and grammar. They will be doing constructed response in the writing portion, which they have not done before, and they will be doing extended response, which they had done previously in years past. We will not be giving the NECAP science assessment. Instead, we will be staying with, in all schools across the state of Maine, we'll be staying with the MEA science assessment. Our 8th grade and our 5th grade students will take the science assessment this spring. So they will still have that testing. So we will have MEA data, but it will just be for science and science only, and for those 2 grade levels only.
Good question. Does this put us at a disadvantage percentage-wise with the release of the NECAP results because it's taken so close to the beginning of the school year with summer slides and not being in school with, keeping up on math skills? So are we anticipating, I would anticipate seeing lower percentages?
It's going to, a couple of things we're going to have to keep in mind. We're going to have to look at the NECAP data over a course of 3 years to really draw a conclusion. One of the things that you need to think about, and that's actually kind of one of our next slides, is that the MEA assessment, when it was given in March, was assessing that grade level. So if a 3rd grade student was taking the assessment in March, it was assessing 3rd grade expectations. Now, when they take the NECAP in October, for example, if I am a 4th grade student taking that in October, it's actually assessing the previous year's knowledge, let's say, or learning that took place. So it is going to be a transition for us. And also we need to think about the cut scores, or what they expect students to score to meet expectations, are not going to be the same as the MEA. They're going to be different. So we're probably going to see a flux. I don't know which way it's going to go, but it's going to be different data for us to look at. What it means to meet the expectation on the MEA may not be the same for the NECAP, and the time of the year has changed. So we're going to have to look at it over 3 years. So when we get the data next year, it's going to be really good information for us to look for either improvement or celebrations, but we'll need to follow it over 3 years to make the best conclusion, because the NECAP is still will be in flux also. Anything else I could provide you for the NECAP? We're going to transition back to Kerry about some more information about the high school.
This is really going to be short. All I wanted to do was have you know that we do give College Board tests. The state sponsors the College Board tests. We give PSATs and SATs to virtually all of our students. And community college also offers Accuplacer, and this year for the first time they actually came to the high school and 24 of our students took the Accuplacer, which identifies what the skills set are for the students, and it gives them information almost immediately about how they do on that. So those are the tests that we are giving. This is the SAT state testing, and what I've done is I took the class of 2007, class of 2008, 2009, and 2010, and put them side by side in the 3 areas that they're tested in for their SATs. In critical reading, you can see there's been a significant growth every year. And when you're looking at math, in addition, they also have made some nice progress, with writing being also improvement. It looks like our class this year has really done well with those tests, and has scored very high in this last year. And again, that's each of those graduating classes, and you can
Well,
see.
blue one beats a blue one, is that what you're talking about?
This
Blue means blue?
blue, it doesn't change at all. You're looking at one test. This is a set of tests in critical reading, and in this year, this is what we scored. Last year, this is what we scored, and they're all taking them as seniors. Okay, so the senior class takes, and you can see over the course of the last 4 years, they've had some steady growth. Of course, it's a different population of students, and we could very easily see, sometimes you'll have a class that has a lot of very high scoring students, and the following year we can see another class that has a different profile. So this is just like one snapshot of the information that we have. And I probably don't anticipate that there's going to be another class that's going to go up here, because this is exceptionally high. I think it was maybe just an unusual year for folks, but I think that it speaks well for the students. Any questions?
On the AccuPlacer, what grade level, when you picked the 24 students, was that for?
They're allowed to take that. I think that they can take it. Usually they're juniors.
Juniors.
But some seniors take it too. They can take it. It's an option for them to take it. And some of the students like to take it a little bit earlier if they're interested in going to community college, because it gives them information about what skill set they have to achieve in order to be able to get into college. And when they do go to community college, if they haven't already passed at a certain skill level, they have to pay for an additional course in order to even start the community college. So for some of the kids, it gives them a little bit of a nudge about getting those high scores, getting their scores up, so that when they actually go to college, they don't have to take some high school courses, which it works out to be, before they actually can start into community college. So it's been a good way for some of the students to realize, gee, I better get on the ball here and better work on improving some of those skills. Okay?
How long have they been taking these tests? How many years now? It's not been that long.
Are you talking about the SATs?
Yes.
The state started 4 years ago and made it a part of
That's
our...
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
And what it showed to me on that chart, that the students 4 years ago were not expecting to take an SAT test and weren't prepared that much for it. Now that it's in the system, you can see it's increasing every year, going up through every class. And the last class, 2010, they're well prepared for it.
Well, you're absolutely right. We didn't expect these students in this class. The prior year, it hadn't been 100% of the students taking the test. Only
Yeah.
students who were planning to go to college or had chosen to take the test. So you're
Because
right.
state law changed.
Yeah.
And the MEA went away.
Yeah, I remember I was here when it
Right,
went.
Yeah.
right.
But,
So,
but the students, when were focused on something else, they weren't focused on it. And now you can see that they're getting focused on it, because look at the results of the 2010 class. Every one of them's gone up ever since the first year they took them.
And I think you're right. I think the culture at the school is that this is a high-stakes test, and they want to do well, because it does have something to do with their future.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they do get invested in it. Right. We're going to move on to this next portion, and for that purpose, we have a packet that we're going to pass out to you. While Audrey's passing that out, what we wanted to do is we wanted to share with you, once we have the data We
Read
wanted you
it.
to know what some of the work is that we're doing at the schools in order to have this data, use it, and make improvements in instruction and in teaching and learning. So first of all, this slide talks about what do all of us do that's in common in our 3 different schools. And what we do on a regular basis is we provide modeling and coaching and workshops about the best literacy practices. And that would be in lots of different ways during professional development days, during time in classrooms with the teachers, after school, during staff and faculty meetings. And what we're trying to do is have all of our teachers aware of what the best practices are in order to improve reading and learning in the school. The second thing we do is we support what we call data conversations. And that's when we take the data, like you've been talking tonight about, we put it up on the wall, and we have conversations about, well, what do you think is happening here? Where is it that we need to make some improvements? What are the things that we could do to bring those kids up? And what are we going to do about those kids that are in the red, as you were saying? How can we make those improvements? And so we work very specifically on those things. We all do it differently in our buildings because we have different ages and we have a different staff, we have different time and schedule, but we'll each talk a little bit about that later on. One of the things we're also doing is we're collaborating, the 3 of us together, trying to help build a K-12 21st century literacy plan. And what we're trying to do together is have a chance to have people look at a plan from kindergarten through grade 12 that addresses and talks about all the different areas of literacy. And then the last thing that we do is try to provide guidance for programs and practices for our students. And we look at students who are reading at level, below level, and above level, and we try to promote and help support practices and programs for those students. Now, the packet that you got, the first piece that I'd like you to just take a look at is this flyer brochure.
Please.
At least one.
We're going to be able to have to look at something, thank you.
Can I move over there and talk to them about this without being way up?
They just,
Need the mic.
community likes to hear it on the mic.
Okay, all right.
You could bring the mic with you.
Or use that
try
one.
this one. Try that mic.
How about if I just sort of stand sort of halfway? Okay. This brochure, basically what we've done in the brochure is we've just introduced ourselves to you so you know who we are, and also talked about the roles of that we have, and it's very similar to the list that I just went through. It's just a little bit more in detail. And in addition, we've given you our email addresses if you should want to get in touch with us or ask any questions. We're always available. And that's basically what we've done in this brochure. What we also wanted you to see is that we're trying to coordinate, we're trying to work together, and have had some regular meetings now where we're working on the scope and sequence or a nice smooth flow from kindergarten all the way up to high school, and trying to help with transitions among and between classes as well as among schools. And the second thing we've included in your booklet or your packet is something called the Universal Literacy Elements for Deeper and More Powerful Content Learning. And the reason that we wanted to share this with you is if you open this up, it's a trifold, and if you open it up and you will see 6 areas, and they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And when we talk about literacy now, we're talking about something that is a little bit different from when you and I were in school. Literacy has taken on sort of a new meaning. A lot of us who are working in literacy with students, bless you. And that is, if you think about what we were thinking when we were going through school, we were thinking about reading and writing and listening and speaking as basically being our literacy program. And what I think about now when we're talking about literacy is we think about the reading, writing, speaking as being the 3, going in 3 directions. And then I think about 3 other things weaving themselves through it. And one of those things is inquiry and research. And because of the internet and because of the kind of inquiry that's being done by students all the time, they're always going after information. It's a technology age. That information and being able to ask good questions and access information is becoming more and more important for us to pay attention to and to use in our schools. The second line that goes through is vocabulary. And there's vocabulary through the reading and the writing and the speaking. And there's lots of new vocabulary as a result of technology. So that's another weaving if you're thinking about this as becoming a tapestry. And then the third strand that goes through is the technology strand. And that technology strand is ever changing. And I don't know about you, but I just got a new cell phone and it can do a whole lot of things that the one I bought a year ago couldn't even do. And I'm forever amazed. And just trying to keep up with technology and the changes has an awful lot to do with keeping up with literacy and the changes that the kids are encountering. And for some of us, we have to really scurry around trying to be able to keep ahead of them, to be able to work with them at the high school level so that they're really, truly ready for their futures. And so we're calling this 21st century literacy, and we're trying all the time to talk about what do students need in order to be successful in the 21st century. And so this brochure just kind of is an illustration of those 6 areas, and if you think about the tapestry that we're weaving in terms of literacy, it's shifting and it's changing, and I think about it as being very different from the tapestry that I worked in literacy back quite a few years ago. So it's very, very interesting, it's intriguing, and it's an exciting time to be in education, but we're constantly learning new things, and so are the students. So that's what that one's for. You have, you have one more piece that's called,
Two.
and the school kit. Would you take a look at the school kit for just a minute, please? You have the literacy school kit. The purpose of our including that is, as part of the very first year that I was involved with the high school, we had a literacy team that went on a retreat, thank you, and used this literacy school kit. And what we wanted you to do is we wanted you to see the questions that we used when we started to build a literacy plan. And as a group, we're talking about trying to build a literacy plan that goes K through 12. But all the questions are the same, regardless of whether you're a kindergarten teacher or you're a high school teacher. Building a culture for literacy in a school and building skills for literacy in a school are pretty similar. So this is a plan this is a kit that we used. And what we did was we went through the questions on the kit with a group, and we created a literacy plan that we're using as a basis for all of the work that we've been doing at the high school. And what Audrey and Heather and I have been talking about, and also been talking about with the CART team, the language arts CART team, and the different folks in the district, is how important it is to have a plan that works K through 12, so that we're all talking in the same language, we're having common goals, and we're having common language that all of the students can recognize and can use. So that's why we put this in, and we don't have time to go through the whole thing for you, but we just wanted you to see what the nature of that is. And as sort of a spin-off of that, the common rubrics packet that you have. This rubrics packet came as a request last year in the spring. We pulled some people together, and we decided if we're asking our students to do senior exhibitions at the very end of their senior year, then we have to have them experience throughout their career in the schools in Lisbon some specific opportunities. One of those is presentations. And one of the things that we know is that in order to do a presentation, you can't just be a senior, be told to do a presentation. There you go, it's your first time ever doing anything like this, and expect them to be able to do it and do it well. So what we started to talk about is how can we put together ways, or sort of, I call them in here touchstones, along the way, along the career of a student in Lisbon that starts very early in their career, all the way in elementary school, and is sort of a touchstone for them, or opportunities for them to do presentations. And so we started to talk about, well, if we have some opportunities and we can build them into our classrooms so kids just very gently have a chance to stand up and present or to do something like that, that we might be able to get them to feel more comfortable by the time they're seniors and they're doing those presentations. So then we said, well, how do we know what a good presentation is? So we got together some teachers from the K2 group, 3-5, 6-8, and the high school. And we took a rubric and we kind of played around with it. We said, can we create a rubric that can go all the way from kindergarten all the way up to high school, and that a kindergarten student can understand? And that's what you have here. You have what our result is. Now, this is just a, I would call this sort of our first try. Some of the teachers have seen it, some of the teachers have given us feedback on it, but what we would hope to do is we would hope to kind of float this out and pilot it and try it with some of our students and see how it goes. But if you see the language in under content, for example, presentation rubric K through 2, we're thinking, well, what does a kindergarten student think about content? And so if we said to a kindergarten student, I really know a lot about it, and I showed it, that's in their language, and that's what we tried to do, is we built the language for kindergartners, and then that very same block, if you keep going to the 3 to 5, it says, it shows a full understanding of the topic, which a 3 to 5 year grader would know. And then for the 6 to 8, it says shows a full understanding of the topic. They seem to understand that language just as well. And then when you go to the 9th, 12, it's still the same, but some of them shift and change. And become more sophisticated as it goes on. So this was our concept, this was our idea. We're playing around with that a little bit, but we also thought that we could do the same thing, the same kind of thing in writing and have some common rubrics. And you have questions? Sure, go.
Please.
I'll come back to you though, okay?
problem.
All right. And then in research and inquiry, and also in technology products. So we'd be able to do that sort of spiral, we call that sort of spiraling through, and being able to have checkpoints along the way, or touchstones along the way. And in order to do that and do it successfully, we're going to have to talk with teachers, get them involved in it, find out where people are comfortable doing that, and build ourselves some opportunities for the kids to practice so that they can be successful in their senior exhibition. So that's another thing that we've been working with some. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, my question is, okay, like in the high school, like when I went to high school, there was like different levels of, like there was kids that wanted to go to college courses, or kids that wanted to go. So how's that?
All of the
Concept
students,
versus
all
there.
of the students do this.
We have that concept, like there's college class students and there's business or something like that? We have
Not
that.
anymore.
Tracking, it's the old-fashioned
Oh,
tracking.
okay, all right.
Like general, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, all of our students are working in,
They all work, like all, do we have like?
We have
all
some-
different math classes are all the same? Everybody's being taught the same math, everybody being taught the same English?
Yes, they're taught the same English.
No, I'm just saying.
We try our very best not to track. We allow kids to be able, to, if they want to challenge themselves to get to the top, most rigorous classes, we allow them to do so. So to say that we don't have one class for one group of kids, and then the next, and then the next highest. Every kid has a very basic level of English, math, science, and social studies they have to participate in. And then if they want to get into a higher level class, all they simply have to do is ask, and we try to put them in there. But we don't put kids in little pigeonholes and try to, right.
Is it like,
Yeah, there's no basic math anymore, there's no basic English anymore, it's English.
But there are honors classes.
Yes, there are.
That divide out and separate
and that?
the more able
Gifted
student
people
from the
and,
more average student.
But I'm just saying, is, okay, so if you have that, you have the honor student go against they could both be in the same classroom?
Absolutely.
But the teacher's teaching them the same? How's she teaching?
the teachers do something that we call differentiate, or they give different extra support, extra help for the students, and they try to give them extra time after school, and as often as possible bring them along so that they aren't going to fall way behind.
I was saying, it's like the honor student, she's talking to him for about 5 minutes, and she's talking to the regular student for about 5 minutes?
No, there'd be more time for the students who need it.
They sort of have to become independent when they get to high school and grow up, and if they need extra help, they need to go see the teacher and make appointments and do all
I'm
that.
saying, that's right.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know, it's great, that's, kind of makes sense.
The expectations from even the days when I was in school have changed considerably, and there's a lot more expected of the students, as it should be in this day and age. So that's why there isn't the tracks anymore.
Pete?
The concept of when I went to school has gone away. When I went to school, you had a general course you took, if that's what you wanted to take a business course or a college course. Now you take whatever courses there is. There's no set business course, there's no set general course. The general course was one for the easy course. It was very basic subjects and got you through high school and gave you a diploma. You didn't learn much, but you got a diploma.
Excuse me, Pete. Of course, kids learned.
Well,
There was effective instruction in those days, and I was proud of that.
Yeah, I would do pretty good.
I think there's
I'm
instruction
talking
now.
before
at the
you were
high
even
school.
teaching.
Well, I know, but I
Okay,
really.
so
good
you don't
stuff
know what it
happened
was
in the
like.
past.
You don't know what it was like before you were teaching, okay?
That's true, but I was a part of the tracking period, and
And
my
it was
kids
changing then, when you
succeeded.
started.
Yes, and I'm not sure I really like it as it has evolved, for other reasons that we don't need to talk about, but good stuff happened in the past. Tracy was a part of that. Tracy did well. Tracy didn't take the top English class. She went on and has done well. She could have, she should have, but she was afraid to.
But on the other hand, my son has a learning disability, took all the top classes, I still don't understand how he graduated the way he did, so it's all what you put into it.
That's right.
It absolutely
That's
is.
right.
But, you know, it's not tracked the same way it was 50 years ago when I was in school. It's
And
not-
that's largely because society has changed.
Yes, it has, I
In the old
agree,
days,
I
we
agree,
had
I
kids
agree.
who were just interested in getting out of school and they go to work in the woods with their fathers.
Or the mills, or whatever. I mean, I understand, I'm not saying against, I'm against this thing. It's-
No, I don't think you are. I'm just defending education in the old days.
Well, I'm not defending the old.
No, I am.
Oh.
I am. That's why I jumped in.
Well, to every extent possible, we do try to challenge the students to the greatest extent that we can, and we try to give them as much support as we possibly can to ensure that they're going to be successful. And part of the senior exhibition is all the students do come, and all the students do the presentations, and I think every year they've gotten more and more solid and more impressive. In this past year, our special ed students were shining with their senior exhibitions. They were exceptional, so we're really pleased with that. And we think the more that we do to be able to give the kids experiences with this, the better. So we have been having a lot of focus on that with some help too from Monica Milhelm, who's been helping us with the community connection as well, which has been great. So are we ready to move along? Is that okay? Okay.
I think so.
This again is just talking about what we just went over, that we're working on aligning the
Hey,
work.
Mr. Healy, you may. Yep, thank you.
That we're aligning the work with the main learning results. The brochure, the 3-page brochure that I gave you is also aligned with the main learning results, so that all of those things that you read on there are supporting the main learning results. So those are the 6 areas that we really focus on. And the graduated rubrics is what I was calling those common rubrics, is graduating them. That means like we start low and then they get more and more complex as the students go along. And building common language so the students hear the same language about each of those things. In those areas, presentation writing, research and inquiry, and technology. And then building that literacy plan. So those are some of the initiatives, or most of the initiatives that we've been taking. What we're going to do now is have each of us talk about what we do specifically in our schools. As you know, all of our schools are different because of the ages of the students and the nature of the teachers. So Audrey's going to talk with you about LCS.
Okay. Hopefully that works. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to talk a little bit briefly about what I specifically do at the community school. The first thing I do is I work with the Maine Literacy Partnership, which I'm involved in a cohort that has 10 coaches from 4 different school districts. There are about 50 schools that participate in the partnership. We meet monthly for intensive professional development to study and learn the best and most recent based practices around teaching and learning. We have classroom days, and then we have clinical days each month, and what we learn within those days, I bring back to the schools and integrate them into classrooms, working side by side with teachers and with students, and that model is called the apprenticeship model. That's one of the new languages that we're learning. And the piece that's really important for us is the literacy partnership is important for our school for the growth and development of our whole literacy program. And the literacy partnership, I'm just going to give you a little background. It's a model of instruction to support improved student achievement through reading, writing, and all content areas. So we kind of weave it in throughout the day. And it is the most effective professional development model. We develop common beliefs and understandings about teaching and learning through reading and writing to be successful in the content areas. One of the things that's powerful about it is that the coaching and the learning takes place within the school. And the professional development also takes place within the school. So teachers are involved in graduate coursework. Again, we work side by side. I'm going into the classrooms. And it's throughout the year. It's not just a one-shot deal. So the teachers are feeling like they're getting ongoing professional development. I can do whole staff development. I can do small group professional development, and I can do individual professional development. And I've done the small group and the individual so far this year. One of the other things that's really cool is that 2 of the university professors come in and are accessible to us throughout the school year as we're working through the partnership, and they also come in and provide professional development and coaching for me and also for our teachers. And that has been very, very powerful. The other piece that's been fantastic is the professional library of books and videos that we have, and it kind of puts our practice in action. The videos show real classrooms where the practice that I'm learning is taking place, so I can take that back to the classrooms, and also we can use those for professional development. And the other piece that's been really awesome is the change in our faculty meetings. Now they're more focused on professional development and working with the data. And right now we're working on word work K5, which means spelling, vocabulary, those types of things.
Grandma?
Yes, grammar.
Thank you.
Yes. So that's one piece that I do. The next piece is Title I. And Title I is a federally funded program, and the school qualifies depending on the level of free and reduced lunch that we receive. But all kids can qualify and have access to the Title I services. And at the elementary school, there's 3 of us that work with the Title I students, and those are students who are identified as needing the most need for intervention, and those would be, if you think about the slides, those would be the ones at the bottom that were in the red, that were your 5%, 13%, you were talking about those kids. So 2 of the Title I teachers, one's a reading teacher and one's an ed tech, and they work specifically with small groups and individual students all day long. And I work with some small group, some individual Title I students, and then I also work with other kids throughout the day while I'm working in classrooms. And then we have data dialogue that goes on throughout the day. We have, during common planning time, teachers will ask me to come in. Can we talk about this assessment? I'm having some struggles with a student. Let's just have a dialogue about the students. We do that during team times, Thursday afternoons. We review and we plan for daily instruction and RTI, and I'll talk to you about response to instruction in a minute. But we talk about specific kids and the needs and to inform and drive the classroom instruction. And we also, talking about the data allows us a forum to rework the units to better support the curriculum. And that's been going on quite a bit in several of the grade levels. And then I'm going to go to, how do I get to the next slide? To the right? Yep. So I'm going to talk to response to instruction. This is our assessment wall. And one of the pieces of the Maine Literacy Partnership is to make an assessment wall of your school. So these are all of the kids in our school. And it gives the staff and the teachers an overall picture, a snapshot of, I gotta find my, oh, there we go. A big picture of how we're doing. And this right here are our kids that they does not meet the standards, partially meets, and exceeds. And with this information, we can look at our student body as a whole. We can look at small subgroups, and then we can go in and we can look at individual students. And then for our response to instruction, which is part of something else that I work with, we look at our does not meet group. And we look at what are the resources we have in our building and how can we best service those students. And part of that is through RTI, which is a response to instruction. So from this assessment wall, we put every kid has an ID number, and the assessment piece is recorded on the back of the card. From that, it's determined who will be in which intervention group in an RTI model. So in RTI, all the grade levels at the community school are doing RTI for at least a half hour a day. So that's a half hour of explicit instruction in literacy. So some kids are getting double dosed in reading instruction. Some kids are getting triple dosed. So in an RTI model, for example, a double dose student would be a student who gets their reading group within their classroom, and then they get a second reading group in an intervention model, which would be an RTI. And then you have your triple dose kiddo who also, on top of that, would receive Title I services. So the goal of the assessment wall in the RTI piece is to move those kids along, because we want kids to get to the meets. We want kids to meet the expectation. The Title I staff, we all are involved in the RTI group. I have a 5th grade RTI group, and the other 2 staff members work with grade levels also in the RTI group. There was a conversation today during team time, a 1st grade team time, and they were doing a progress monitoring session around RTI, response to instruction, and they shared with an administrator how their RTI has changed the expectations of their day-to-day academics, and they could not imagine they're a day without having RTI. It's made that much of an impact in their students' learning and how they're teaching their kids. So it's pretty powerful. And in our RTI model, we're trying to get the intervention to go for a 13-week block of time. So the goal for next year would be for an intervention model to go, for us to have 3 13-week intensive intervention blocks for students in our RTI. I think that's.
Tracy?
I attended a conference this past October for the school committee hosts, our MSMA hosts different kind of classes for us, and I went to one that had this, and they had their charts up there, and I was curious to know if Lisbon had put something like that together, and I am thrilled to listen to what they had to say about what these charts do, for the staff, being able to really identify which children need it and how they progression along, was quite empowering, and I'm happy to see that we are doing that. And I know for my own kids, I happened to ask Riley today, what do you have this afternoon? And I have RTI. And I said, well, that's good. I think what Pete had brought up about the SATs 4 years ago becoming mandatory and the attitude of students, the way they viewed it, I think RTI is going to do the same thing for our students here in Lisbon as well, because I think that they just know that that's what is expected of them when they're in these groups. And I've seen a difference in my kids with having this, so I think it's a wonderful thing that we've added.
It's very powerful, and the dialogue and the conversations that I hear around the school amongst teachers and amongst grade levels about, oh, what are you doing in your RTI? How's that going for you? I've got this, the conversations are just, there's so much more depth to them since we've started this model, and it makes a difference that everybody can see it. They can have big conversations about it to drive instruction, to help kids move forward.
George?
Who takes the time to maintain this?
The teachers, each grade level,
Okay.
they come together and, yeah. It's a school-wide project that we've all embraced.
Where's it hung up at?
It's in the conference room.
Okay, just wondered, I didn't see it when we took the tour.
It's there.
Okay.
And if you have any questions, or please email me or come on by and take a look.
Where does the time for the double dip and the triple dip RTI come from? What are the kids pulled out of?
The grade levels themselves have blocked out a half hour within their day. So if their literacy block is, say, an hour and a half hour of that would be RTI. I hope I'm saying that correctly. In addition, I'm sorry. In addition to. So it may be that it takes the place of.
There's different models for different grades.
Thank you, Kate.
For instance, third grade is doing the 12 neediest children according to the data for the last universal screening. They are going with 3 interventionists, and then the rest of the children are being divided amongst 3 other teachers, and content area stuff is being taught per the MLRs to those 24 kids in each class. So they're not losing anything. When they're doing a guided reading group, part of the Readers and Writers Workshop, Readers Workshop in this case, they're getting the guided reading, and then they're getting the independent reading, and that's all getting wrapped up during the literacy time. So then everybody at one time in a half an hour or 45-minute block will go to their RTI group, whoever that may be, And that time is spent specifically on literacy. And if a child is getting a Title I service, then that's already pre-planned as part of their day.
And these RTI groups, excuse me, are broken up into what is identified for each child on what specifically they need, whether it's comprehension or
Right.
other things.
If Audrey brought some samples of some of the cards, and you can see on the back of them that there's an ID number, and there's all sorts of codes on there, so there's anonymity between them, but if you flip the card over, you'll see that the triangulation of data of the 3 assessments we gives us a good indication of what child, of the needs specific children have. So there might be a fluency group, there might be a comprehension group, there might be a decoding group. It all depends on the need, and there might be some kids that receive RTI 13 weeks in fluency, and then they progress monitoring, they have met their goals that the group has given them, the grade level has given them, and then based on the next universal screening data, they might need some help in decoding, so they'll go to a different group, but they might not need anything after that. The goal is to give them that boost of explicit instruction to get them moved forward and jump a column.
And I think that's admirable. My question is, don't they lose something if they get 3 shots of it rather than 1?
And they do, definitely. And what we try to do is weigh the difference between losing 13 weeks of, say, science and social studies and what they would gain in learning to read. And we can kind of catch up with the science and social studies, but if we haven't caught them up in reading, it isn't going to matter.
That's right, and I do know the statistics if they don't learn to read by the end of 3rd grade, and it's so critical. But as we're concerned about
Yeah.
test scores in all the areas,
Yeah, and
Do we
our
pound
paperwork
ourselves
is
with hammers?
extensive, so that we're tracking, so that they're not missing out on the same thing all the time. And sometimes we take away from their independent work time. We all know that not all students are strong independent workers. So sometimes their triple dip comes out of that time, and they get less independent seat work to do and more time one-on-one with a teacher. We haven't developed their independent work habits like we may have, but that's a choice you have to make. So, but we do try to balance it out.
thank you. Anybody else, other questions? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, Audrey.
Just a brief overview of how we look at data at Philip W. Sugg Middle School. We take a look at NWEA data and MEA data in a little bit of a different manner. Give you an overview of looking at the Descartes, which is information from NWEA, how we use data ladders, and just ongoing professional development. It's kind of bright and the colors are a little distorted, but one of the reports that was available for us through the MEA gave us an idea of looking at how accurate our students were at answering multiple choice. Going down the column with the stars and to the right of the star, the numbers may be a little bit difficult for you to see, but beginning here, we're looking at, in this grade level, it happens to be 6th grade math. When our 6th grade students were taking the assessment, how accurate were they when they were answering multiple choice? And this gave us an idea. We were working on a concept called academic literacy and helping them to analyze questions. And what we looked at is we could look at the main state learning results, and we could see how accurate were our students when they were answering. In our learning result, which they had identified as A4, our students, 74% of them answered that student correctly. And if you see this greenish blue star, what we're looking at is our students were in between 50% and just under 75% accuracy. Here with the yellow stars, our students were performing above a 75%. 90% of our students were answering questions related to this standard accurately. So it gave us an idea of which standards do we need to work on and how could we help our students break those types of questions apart and become better thinkers around those standards. area of the boxes where our students were less than 50% accuracy. So that gave us also an idea of, less than 50% of our students were answering that correctly. Again, it was able to target for us where we needed to see improvement and where do we need to see celebrations and still move forward. Over here are items related to the constructed response. Looking in this greenish color is where we were close to the state scores and where were we at or above the state performance. So we're able to look at the specific information related to this testing data. I hope that when we transition to NECAP that we'll be provided with some of the same information. Just another way, Mr. Karen, you had talked about how do we help those students who may be at the bottom. At SUG, we're working on using our NWEA data in an intensive manner, using the RIT scores or how the students are performing to really get and hone in on those specific skills. These are just some made-up students' names here, but we can use something offered by the NWEA, what they call is a Descartes. And the Descartes is actually, if you picture in your mind, just a really large binder. And that binder contains all of the skills and strategies that we could use to support students. And they take the Descartes, and based on your score or your score range, they identify that for you. So we can translate our students' scores into what does this student need to work on. So for example, this is a data ladder that potentially could have been created that had to do with thinking about numbers or numbers in operations. We could use the students' scores to identify these students, Courtney, Sydney, Cindy, Susan, and Ike. When they're talking about numbers and operations, what they needed to learn is very different than the students at the top of our ladder. These students really needed to work on recognizing and identifying numbers up to the 100,000s place, whereas you move up the data ladder, the skills and concepts become increasingly sophisticated. So we're able to use NWEA information to really, really focus in on our students. Our math science folks at SUG have really done some extensive work with this. So we can look at specific students, we can look at groups of students who have alike needs and how can we support them. ELA and social studies staff are beginning that work also. But just another way to look at how to use data, especially with NWEA. Mr. Karen, did you have a question?
I just kind of thinking about it, like in the old days, like A's, B's, C's, and D's, right?
No, this is based on, what our goal here is you want to think about is growth. If you think of this as literally rungs of a ladder, if you're going to step up here, step up here, step up here, step up here. We want to move these students forward up to the next level so that they meet that growth target. We want to move them forward. So what we're doing is we're meeting them exactly where they're at. If they're here, we're not teaching them way up here. We're meeting them here and then pushing them forward. So we're looking at their growth. We're measuring their height. If you think about that slide. Okay.
What's that?
Okay.
Oh, Pete, you had a question? Oh, okay.
Three.
Move your hands.
I didn't have it on.
Stretching.
Okay. And we'll transition to just a quick excerpt for LHS.
Okay.
All of us have been answering the question, what do we do when students don't learn? And that's what Audrey and Heather have done so far. At the high school, it's a little different because the students are heavily into their content areas, and the teachers are really driving information when they're there. But what we have done at the high school is the literacy leadership team has talked about what is it that we need to do at the high school. And one of our questions is, what do we do when students don't learn? By having our literacy plan, a lot of our initiatives at the high school have been based on that plan, and it has included, one of the things that has included has been expanded classroom material choices, and they're based on what we call lexiles. The NWEA gives us information about how, where a student is reading, how complex the information is that they're able to read, the vocabulary, the difficulty of the vocabulary, and it gives us a number or a range where we can see, can this student read something that's very highly sophisticated or something that's middle range or something that needs to be easier for them. We've been working with the high school teachers to take a look at the materials that they actually share with students. And oftentimes the textbook may be beyond what some of the students in the school can actually read. If in my class I have students who can't access the text or can't read the text, it makes it very hard for them to be able to take it home at night and study from it. So one of the things that we're doing is trying to adapt some of the materials within that classroom by using these Lexile scores for students, and then bringing in materials that are going to be the same content but written at a slightly less difficult level so that they can access the content and still the information, but sometimes they can do it independently. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do at the high school, with the intention always that we're going to move them forward and help them climb up the ladder at the same time, make sure that they don't lose any of the content that they're going to be responsible for. One of the other things that we do is we have done a lot of approaches for strategies for the teacher in the classroom, and working really hard on comprehension strategies and literacy strategies and excellent instructional strategies, so the teachers are really, really paying attention to how the students are doing, and they're assessing how they're doing all the way along the way, and we call that formative assessment. In other words, watching them as they go and making sure that they don't extend beyond where the student is understanding, and when they find a student who isn't understanding, they take care of it right then instead of leaving it too late. So we're working on becoming better at being able to give those students support in that way. One of the nice things that's happened at the high school is we initiated a program called Sustained Silent Reading, and I think you've heard about that before. One of the things that we found with the Sustained Silent Reading is it's an automatic way for everyone in the school, all at the same time, to pick up a book of choice and to read. The research has shown us that there's no better way to be able to improve reading for someone who's at that age, in that age group, than to have them practice it. And a lot of students don't practice it anymore because they have TV and they have their cell phones and they have the computer, so they don't necessarily spend time with books. But this is a time when you walk into the high school, everyone has a book or a magazine or something that they're reading, the printed word, the written word, and they do it almost every day for 20 minutes. And we've found that we have a huge improvement in circulation out of the library, many, many more books being taken out, many more books being read. And we really think that this has been a huge impact on the actual reading level of some of our students. The addition of the Read 180 program that was funded last year, we have students that we selected out of the 8th grade based on their NWEA scores who were not special ed students, but were students who we were worried about, sort of in that red range and in that lower range, who really needed a specialized program. And they've entered into the Read 180 program, which we're doing for freshmen. Our teacher is Amy Kissel. She's wonderful. The kids love this program. If you go in and you ask them, what do you think about this class, they will tell you they really, really like it. Now, for these students who in the past have not liked really even coming to school sometimes and really wouldn't say to you, gee, I really like class, to have them answer that question that way is really remarkable. And this program is fun for them. It's at their level. They're having great success, and we're finding that it's really been working well for them. So that's another sort of a response to their instructional needs based on the NEWA data, and saying when they enter the high school, let's catch them very, very early and see if we can't sort of bump them up and move them up through that ladder, and see if we can improve the skills in their reading comprehension and their fluency. So those basically have been the initiatives that we've had at the high school, as well as the graduated rubrics that we've been talking about. And we work all the time on different things like the inquiry research process, the writing process, reading comprehension and strategies for that, and that's on an ongoing basis. I know it's getting late, so I'm not going to go on and on, but I just wanted to give you sort of an overview of what we're doing at the high school. Again, I'm in classes and coaching teachers and working with teachers during their professional development days and during faculty meetings, and as often as possible modeling for them ideal literacy instructional strategies for them. I think, do you have any questions about the high school?
Any questions? I guess not.
So in summary, in your brochure, we just close with the quote that's on the front. That's literacy is thinking, thinking builds the future. And all of us and all of the staff are working very, very hard to build the futures for our Lisbon students through this literacy. And we thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're ready now for a motion, are we?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Moved, Reed, seconded.
Second?
Second, Austin. All those in favor so signify. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
5-0, thank you, it's a vote.